Hello everyone, welcome back to the J.R. Stewart channel. Of course, I'm your host, the J.R. Stewart. Today we're diving into a crucial chapter in history that's left an indelible mark on the world, and that's the transatlantic slave trade. Now this is a complex and sobering topic, so it's hard to cover in 3 to 5 minutes of that this video is going to last, but I'm going to do my best. So, because understanding the essence of what was going on is essential. I think as we, struggle to get past these things and overcome these things, we have to understand our history. So that's why I'm working on this project to document as much Black history and world history as possible, so we don't lose the fact of what happened, but also understanding what happened needs to be put in the context of why it happened. So it needs to be put framed into a broader context so we can understand it, because later on we may not understand it. People may look back on history and say, well, I don't understand why this happened. Who would be so cruel to do something like this? But these things did happen and they're documented, and I'm going to do my best to sort of frame some kind of explanation around these things. But before I begin, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you will be notified anytime we upload new videos that you may find interesting. And so you don't miss out on any deep dive into fascinating historical topics that we cover here, because that's what we do. Okay, so let's get into it. The transatlantic slave trade. It spanned roughly between the 15th century and the 19th century. It involved the forced migration, nice word saying kidnapping, forced migration of millions of Africans into the Americas. So it wasn't just America, the Americas, North America, Central America, South America. Probably the most going to Brazil, and in the Caribbean. Now, this is a dark chapter in our history, in all of history, world history, really. And it's crucial to shed some light on his understanding and understand the root this whole ugly mess has had on the world stage. A lot of times we try to sort of smooth it over or glance over it, because who wants to be reminded of the ugly past? No one wants to. This is very ugly history, dark history, not dark in color, like me, but dark in the sense that it was very nasty. It's man's inhumanity to man, and it's the worst example, at least one of the worst examples, of our cruelty to our fellow brethren that history has shown. And of course, we don't want to talk about it too much. We want to say, hey, we've gotten past it. There are some that won't let us get past it, and that some kind of use it as weapons to control people, but that's another story. That's called politics. So let's get into seeking wealth and expansion. They established what's called the triangle trade route. It basically connected Europe to Africa to the Americas. So that was a triangle. And the slaves were a crucial part of that, because the lands in America were newly found by the Europeans, and they had migration there. So people were going to the Americas to be free of some of the tyranny of Europe, but also for wealth. There was lots of land. Just go claim it. The settlements were there, and they were starting to grow. But on top of that, they needed wealth. They needed money. They needed a cash crop. And of course, they needed to be able to exploit the wealth and resources of North America and South America. In order to exploit that, cotton, tobacco, sugar, they needed a workforce, a labor force. And that's where the Africans came in. So the slave trade was established. that the Europeans would establish trade routes in trade relations with African nations. Those African nations would go and then kidnap other Africans and sell them to the Europeans for, a lot of times they would sell it to them for liquor, rum, for sugar. But the biggest thing that the Europeans had to trade were weapons, guns, bullets, which the Africans basically wanted because it was a source of power for them. It was a way that they could conquer other African nations, other tribes. And of course, by conquering other tribes, they could sell those tribes to the Europeans, get more guns, weapons, and that cycle has not ended. In fact, it would be nice for me to report that this whole slave business is over with and it's behind us, but it's not. We have more slavery today than we ever had during this period between the 15th and 19th century. We have more slaves now than ever before. So slavery has not ended. They were just sort of modified it. It's a little more covert now than ever before. And so this was the reason. It was all about money. It was about, for the Europeans, it was about generating wealth. For the Africans, it was about getting textile, rums, sugar, and weapons, primarily weapons. And for the Americas, North and South America, it was about having a workforce that allowed you to grow. And the transatlantic slave trade led to something what we call the Middle Passage. The Middle Passage is basically the route between America and Africa, the Americas and Africa. And these were routes that slavers used. They packed ships, hundreds of slaves, in very inhumane conditions, stacked them on top of each other. Very unsanitary, very nasty, very dehumanizing. I mean, just bad. I can't, there's no other way to describe it other than just bad, nasty, cruel. But this is how slaves were shipped, packed in these ships. And people would die packed in these ships. One person's waist would land on you because you were right up under them, chained, held in this position. I think every now and then they would unshackle a few once a day. And many died during the Middle Passage. The sharks would follow the slave ships because they knew there was a meal coming, as slavers would throw Africans overboard who were either too sick to make the passage, just throw them in the ocean to be eaten by sharks, or the ones who died. They didn't get any kind of burial, no kind of words, nothing, just tossed over, discarded. And this has left some people say this has left a devastating effect on Africa, but let's kind of examine that for a second. What was the impact to Africa? Today we can probably argue that, of course, families were separated. People were separated. Whole villages were destroyed. Populations were wiped out. So there was some impact there. But the others that's probably felt more today is, there are some countries, African countries, that grapple with their legacy, that they actually participated in this, that part of their history was that they sold Africans into slavery. And after this was done, of course, nothing was done to undo it. A few have tried to make some concessions. Ghana, for instance, has recognized their role and trying to make some amends for what they've done. Generally, it's in the form of apology, but in some policies to repatriate black people into Africa if they're interested. And I guess that's a start. But for the millions that lost their lives on the Middle Passage and the million more that were actually entered into slavery, endured slavery in Americas, I don't think there is no amount of apologies that's going to make up for that, really. And also part of my research covers the impact to America. Well, the impact to America is it made America rich. You know, the at a time when America needed money, because you had other powers. You had the Brits, you had the Spaniards, you had the Portuguese, you had the French, who all wanted to colonize America, wanted to take it over and control it and wanted to run it. But the Americans, of course, wanted to be free of all of that. In order to be free, you needed money because you had to buy weapons, buy ammo, and money was your freedom. And without it, then you ran the risk of not being able to develop and having it to build the wealth that it needed. Sugar, tobacco, cotton, those were the cash crops. Those were the things that the Europeans wanted. And the Europeans made sure that the Americans had slaves by going to establishing trade with Africa to get the slaves. And then the Europeans delivered them to the Americas. Of course, they collected money for it. They sold the slaves. There wasn't a great deal of slavery in Europe, but the Europeans really helped proliferate the slave trade between Africa. They were the middlemen between Africa and America. And of course, we know as slavery went on that there was an effort to abolish slavery. Now, of course, this is Black History Month, February, and we talk about these things like I'm talking about them. Well, except we don't talk about the Middle Passage that much, or the transatlantic slave trade. But they do talk about some of the abolition efforts. And they'll talk about abolitionists like Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass, who paved the way to help end slavery, and they fought against it. But there are a lot of people who helped end slavery in the Americas. Of course, we know the Civil War was a big part of that. But the British ended slavery in their colonies and territories before the Americans did, before America did. And I don't think the credit is given to the Brits for what they've done to, one, end slavery and to help shut down the slave trade. And in fact, you know, America also shut down the slave trade, even though slavery still existed. It was a legal institution here in America, but the trade has stopped. And before the Civil War, that are generally not mentioned because they're white. So let me just cover this list. William Floyd Garrison, Harry, which we've done a video on William Lord Garrison, Harriet Beecher Stowe, who wrote Uncle Tom Cabin, because we know that. We've done a video on her. John Brown, you know, we've covered John Brown in the video. The Grimke sisters, Angelina and Sarah, so they've been covered. In fact, really highly viewed video. Henry Ward Beecher, clergyman. Of course, we covered Henry Ward. We did a video on him. And then here are a few that we haven't done. But, no, I'm sorry. Henry Ward Beecher, they're signaling to me that we haven't done Henry Ward Beecher yet, but he's on the list. And there are two others that are on our list that we're going to get to this month, I promise. Lydia Marie Child and Thomas Garrett. So those are other people that should be mentioned in this conversation that generally are not mentioned. And I'm sorry for that, that people do that, but but we'll go on. You know, here we tried to be as thorough as possible with our coverage. And then, of course, there's people talk about the lingering effects of the slave trade. You know, basically the lingering effect of it has been, of course, destruction for and deterioration of some of the growth of Africa. It totally disrupt their evolution, and the conditions here in America. You know, so we still have what some say systemic racism. I don't necessarily believe that racism is systemic these days, not at least in our governmental system. And if it is, it's not in the form that we think of. But we do have asking the government to fix this somehow, that black people are still haven't been made whole from all of this. So there's still effects of racism and effects of slavery and discrimination that black people have suffered through. And of course, there's always a demand for government to fix it. And so that battle goes on. But there's also not physical, but a psychological effect that slavery has had. The color of your skin determines your character or your worth in society, and it doesn't. It's very foolish thinking. But these are all the things, these are suffering, lingering effects that America is going through, is still going through, as a result of slavery. And so my time is almost up. And like I said, it's hard to really do a deep, deep dive into a very complex system in just a few minutes. But I hope that I have given you enough of an outline. Please stay curious. I hope I've given you enough to wet your whistle, to go do a deep dive. I mean, it's a huge amount of material out there, oceans of material, if you want to know more. So, but that's my deep dive into the transatlantic slave trade. It's a painful chapter in our history, not just in America, but the world history. Of course, I didn't get into the Middle Eastern effect, the Muslim effect, the effect that Islam has had on slavery, and their participation in the slave trade, and how slavery still goes on in Africa, in the Middle East, and some of the Asian countries. Maybe next time we'll maybe try to find more time to cover the topic in more thorough. But I wanted to cover the slave trade itself as for the trade. This is a very painful chapter in American history and world history. And so I hope I've given you enough information to wet your whistle. And so you will go and actually investigate a little bit more on your own. And then you can come back and leave comments and share your thoughts. And maybe we can do a video on your thoughts or information that you may have found. But it's essential to understand, to our understanding, it's essential for fostering empathy, tolerance, and a commitment to justice. So we this is why we study history, for those reasons. But if you found this video informative, of course, give me a thumbs up, and don't forget to share with others. Thank you for joining me today. I'm your host, V.J.R. Stewart, and this is my channel. And stay curious, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next video.